The waitress arrived to work at the Millionaire'S luxurious party and froze when she saw her photo in a black frame. Lauren Wilson wiped down the counter for the third time, her arms aching from the long shift. Tiny beads of sweat dotted her forehead as she glanced at the clock. Only 30 minutes left before she could head back to her cramped studio apartment in Chicago's South Side. "Lauren, table 7 needs another round," her manager barked, barely looking up from his inventory sheet. "On it," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her tired hazel eyes. At 23, Lauren had mastered the art of the professional smile, the kind that pleased customers enough to earn decent tips, but revealed nothing of the constant exhaustion that had become her closest companion. 6 years of waiting tables had paid her bills, but just barely. Tonight was like any other night at the Silver Spoon, an upscale restaurant where the wealthy came to see and be seen. As she delivered drinks to a group of laughing executives, Lauren caught snippets of their conversation. "Lancaster's annual charity gala is coming up. The old man's become a recluse since the accident. Needs extra staff for the event." Lauren's ears perked up at the mention of extra work. She needed every dollar she could get, especially with rent increasing next month, after the guests paid their bill. Leaving a respectable tip, she approached their table. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I couldn't help overhearing about an event needing staff. I'm looking for extra work if you know who I might speak with." The oldest gentleman, gray at the temples with kind eyes, looked up in surprise. "You've got good timing, young lady. I'm Edward Blackwell, Lancaster Enterprises HR Director. We're looking for experienced waitstaff for a charity gala this Saturday at the Lancaster estate. The pay is excellent. Double your usual rate plus bonuses." Lauren's heart raced. "I'd be very interested, sir." "Perfect. Be at this address at 3 p.m. sharp on Saturday for briefing," he said, scribbling on a business card. "Dress code is all black, hair up, minimal jewelry." Back in her apartment, Lauren stood before the small mirror hanging on her bathroom door. The cracked glass fragmented her reflection as she practiced her most polished smile. Saturday's gala could mean an entire month's rent in a single night. She opened her worn nightstand drawer and pulled out a small metal box, the only possession she had from her past. Inside lay a faded photograph of herself as a toddler, the only clue to her origins. The Chicago Children's Home had found her abandoned at their doorstep, with nothing but this picture tucked into her blanket. Lauren traced the outline of her younger self. The photo showed a chubby-cheeked child with curious eyes sitting on what looked like expensive furniture, a strange contrast to her current surroundings. She'd spent countless hours wondering about the people who had brought her into this world only to leave her behind. "Maybe in another life, I lived in a place like where I'm going Saturday," she whispered to herself with a sad smile. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth for May. Lauren stood before the wrought iron gates of the Lancaster estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, having spent nearly all her savings on the train ticket. The mansion loomed ahead, a colossal structure of stone and glass that seemed to touch the clouds. "Name?" asked a stern security guard. "Lauren Wilson. I'm here for the waitstaff position." After checking his list, he nodded. "Follow the path to the service entrance around back." Lauren walked along the immaculate gardens, taking in the scent of roses and freshly cut grass. The Lancaster estate was more magnificent than she could have imagined, the kind of place that existed in movies and daydreams, not in her reality. At the service entrance, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense expression greeted her. "I'm Mrs. Reynolds, the house manager. You're the last to arrive. Quickly now. We have 3 hours before guests arrive." Lauren followed her through a maze of hallways, each more opulent than the last. The kitchen bustled with activity as chefs prepared elaborate dishes while staff hurried about with practiced precision. After a brief orientation, Lauren was assigned to serve champagne during the welcome reception. "Remember," Mrs. Reynolds instructed the staff, "Mr. Lancaster rarely makes appearances at these functions, but if he does, you are to be invisible. Serve and withdraw. No conversation unless directly addressed." Lauren nodded, wondering what kind of man owned such a grand estate yet avoided his own gatherings. As evening fell, guests began to arrive, men in tailored tuxedos and women dripping in diamonds. Lauren moved efficiently among them, offering champagne with a practiced smile while remaining, as instructed, practically invisible. "More champagne, please," requested an elderly woman in a sapphire gown. As Lauren served her, the woman studied her face. "You have the most familiar features, dear. Have we met before?" "I don't believe so, ma'am," Lauren replied politely. The woman continued to stare. "You remind me of someone." Those eyes. Before she could continue, a hush fell over the gathering. James Lancaster had entered the room. At 55, James Lancaster cut an imposing figure, tall with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world, despite his obvious wealth. There was a sadness about him that all his money couldn't hide. Lauren, tray in hand, found herself frozen as his gaze swept the room. When his eyes briefly met hers, she felt an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. Something about his face seemed vaguely familiar, though she knew they'd never met. As the evening progressed, Lauren was assigned to different areas of the mansion. During a brief break, her curiosity got the better of her, and she wandered down a less crowded hallway, admiring the artwork that adorned the walls. At the end of the corridor hung a large portrait of a beautiful woman with a warm smile. The nameplate read, "Grace Lancaster, 1998. Lauren studied the woman's features, her kind eyes and gentle expression. This must be the wife Mr. Lancaster had lost, according to the whispers she'd overheard from guests. Something about Grace's eyes struck Lauren. They were hauntingly similar to her own. A coincidence. Surely. As she turned to leave, another frame caught her eye. Smaller, almost hidden beside a decorative table. Lauren moved closer, her heart suddenly racing. Inside the ornate black frame was a photograph of a small child, perhaps 2 years old, with chubby cheeks and curious hazel eyes. The room seemed to spin as Lauren stared at the image, identical to the one she'd kept all these years in her metal box. The same furniture, the same expression, the same dress, her photograph, here, in the Lancaster mansion. "Can I help you?" Lauren whirled around to find James Lancaster himself standing behind her, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I was just admiring the artwork." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "You seem disturbed? Are you feeling unwell?" "No, sir, I'm fine. I should get back to work." As she hurried past him, James caught her arm gently. "Wait, what's your name?" "Lauren?" "Sir, Lauren Wilson." Something flashed across his face. Recognition, confusion. It was gone in an instant. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly, releasing her arm. "Someone I knew a long time ago." Before Lauren could respond, another voice interrupted them. "James, there you are." A distinguished man in his late 50s approached, placing a proprietary hand on James's shoulder. "The Hamptons are asking for you." His sharp eyes fixed on Lauren with undisguised suspicion. "Is everything all right here?" "Yes, Gregory," James replied, still watching Lauren. "Everything's fine." As Lauren walked away, she could feel both men's eyes on her back. Her hands trembled as she returned to the kitchen. The photograph, identical to hers, hanging in the Lancaster mansion. It couldn't be coincidence. And James Lancaster's reaction to her, that strange recognition in his eyes. By the time the gala ended, Lauren had made her decision. She would find a way to return to the mansion and discover the truth about that photograph. And perhaps, finally, about herself. Lauren couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in her small hotel room, the image of the framed photograph burning in her mind. After the gala, she'd decided to spend her last dollars on a cheap motel room near Greenwich, rather than return to Chicago immediately. She needed time to think, to process what she'd seen. Morning light filtered through thin curtains as she sat cross-legged on the bed, staring at her own copy of the photograph. The similarities were undeniable. The same antique rocking horse in the background, the same floral dress, even the way her small hands gripped a stuffed rabbit. "This doesn't make any sense," she whispered to herself, running her fingers through her tangled hair. Lauren's phone buzzed with a text from her roommate back in Chicago, asking when she'd return. She replied with a vague, "Not sure yet," before pulling out her laptop. If there was a connection between herself and the Lancasters, she needed more information. For the next hour, she scoured the internet for anything she could find about James Lancaster and his family. Most articles focused on Lancaster Enterprises, the multi-billion-dollar investment firm James had built. Others mentioned his philanthropic work, which had increased dramatically since the death of his wife and daughter over 20 years ago. One article caught her attention, a piece from a Society column covering Grace Lancaster's funeral. The photo showed a devastated James holding what appeared to be a baby's blanket. The caption mentioned that the Lancasters' infant daughter, Elizabeth, had died in the same tragic accident. Elizabeth, Lauren whispered the name, feeling an inexplicable tug in her chest. According to her records at the orphanage, Lauren had been approximately 18 months old when she was left at Chicago Children's Home. The timing matched up with the Lancaster tragedy. She closed her laptop and paced the small room. What if? The thought seemed absurd. But what if she was Elizabeth Lancaster? What if she hadn't died in that accident after all? "You're being ridiculous," she told herself firmly. "Rich people don't abandon their children at orphanages." But the photograph, the identical photograph. Lauren pulled up the contact information for Edward Blackwell, the HR director who had hired her for the gala. Her finger hovered over the call button for several seconds before she finally pressed it. "Mr. Blackwell, this is Lauren Wilson from last night's event. I was wondering if you need any more help at the Lancaster estate." 2 days later, Lauren returned to the mansion. This time as part of the cleaning crew hired to restore the estate to its pristine condition following the gala. Her heart pounded as she passed through the ornate gates once again. "Wilson, you're on the second floor east wing," Mrs. Reynolds instructed, handing her a cart filled with cleaning supplies. "Start with the guest bedrooms and work your way toward the study. No entering Mr. Lancaster's private quarters, understood?" Lauren nodded, relieved to have an opportunity to explore more of the mansion. As she pushed her cart up the grand staircase, she caught sight of James Lancaster entering his study with another man, the same one who had interrupted their conversation at the gala. Gregory? James had called him. Something about Gregory Miller made Lauren uneasy. Perhaps it was the calculating look in his eyes when he'd spotted her talking to James, or the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, as Lancaster's closest friend and business partner Gregory had been mentioned in several articles Lauren had read. The two men had known each other since college and had built Lancaster Enterprises together. Lauren busied herself cleaning the guest rooms, all the while keeping an eye out for an opportunity to return to the hallway where she'd seen the photograph. Mid-morning, her chance arrived when Mrs. Reynolds announced she needed to leave for an hour to pick up special cleaning supplies. The moment the house manager left, Lauren slipped down to the hallway. The portrait of Grace Lancaster still hung in its place, luminous and lovely. Lauren studied the woman's features more carefully this time. There was something about the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, that seemed oddly familiar. She turned her attention to the smaller frame, the one containing the photograph identical to her own. Upon closer inspection, she noticed a small engraving at the bottom of the frame. "Elizabeth, 18 months. Elizabeth," she whispered, reaching out to touch the frame. Most people don't know this hallway exists. Lauren whirled around, her heart in her throat. Instead of James Lancaster or Mrs. Reynolds, she found herself facing an elderly woman in a maid's uniform. "I'm sorry," Lauren stammered. "I was just looking at little Elizabeth," the woman finished for her, her eyes kind but questioning. "You're new here. I'm Maria. Been with the Lancaster family for 30 years. "Lauren," she replied, relieved she wasn't being scolded. "I was just curious about the family." Maria stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied Lauren's face. "Curious thing? You have her eyes." "Whose eyes?" "Grace's, Mrs. Lancaster's." Maria tilted her head. "Never seen such a resemblance in all my years here." Lauren's mouth went dry. People often say I look like someone they know." Maria nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Lancaster thought so too. He asked about you after the gala." "He did." Lauren's pulse quickened. "Mm-hmm. Asked who the new girl with the hazel eyes was?" Maria turned toward the photograph of Grace. "She was an angel, that woman, and little Elizabeth was the spitting image of her mother." She sighed heavily. "The accident destroyed Mr. Lancaster? Never been the same since." "What happened?" Lauren asked, though she'd read the basic facts online. "Car crash 22 years ago. Mrs. Lancaster died instantly. Baby Elizabeth supposedly too, though." Maria trailed off, then shook her head. "Listen to me rambling about sad old history. You should get back to work before Mrs. Reynolds returns." As Maria turned to leave, Lauren called after her. "Though what?" The elderly woman paused. Nothing that matters now. Just an old woman's foolish thoughts. She fixed Lauren with a penetrating stare. Be careful about asking too many questions in this house. Girl, some doors are best left closed. With that cryptic warning, Maria disappeared down the hallway, leaving Lauren with more questions than answers. Lauren was dusting bookshelves in the library when she heard voices approaching. She recognized James Lancaster's deep tones immediately, along with Gregory Miller's smoother cadence. Instinctively, she stepped behind a tall bookcase, out of sight but still able to hear their conversation. You're working too hard, James, Gregory was saying. The doctor said you need to reduce stress. Remember? I'm fine, James replied dismissively. The new project in Singapore needs my attention. Let me handle Singapore. That's why you have a partner. There was a pause. Speaking of concerns, that new girl at the gala, what about her? James's tone sharpened with interest. Mrs. Reynolds mentioned she caught her wandering the family wing, looking at old photographs. She's curious. That's hardly a crime. You know how I worry about security, especially with your history of stalkers after the Vanity Fair profile. I've asked for a background check on all new staff. Lauren's blood ran cold. A background check would reveal her orphanage records, which would raise questions about why she was suddenly working at the Lancaster estate. That's excessive. James sounded annoyed. Better safe than sorry, my friend. You remember what happened with that reporter who tried to sneak in as catering staff last year? Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the library. Lauren slipped out quietly, her mind racing. She needed to find out more before Gregory's background check threw a wrench in her investigation. As she rounded the corner, she nearly collided with James Lancaster himself. Mr. Lancaster, I'm sorry. I didn't see you there. James studied her with those piercing blue eyes. Lauren, isn't it? From the gala. Yes, sir. I'm helping with the post-event cleanup. He nodded slowly, still watching her face with unsettling intensity. Have we met before the gala, perhaps in Chicago? No, sir, I don't believe so. Curious. You seem so familiar. He shook his head slightly. Well, don't let me keep you from your work. As he walked away, Lauren felt a strange mix of fear and determination settle in her stomach. James Lancaster sensed their connection, even if he couldn't place it. But Gregory Miller was already suspicious of her, and time was running out. She needed to find concrete evidence linking her to this family, and she needed to find it fast. We can't accept temporary staff for permanent positions, Mrs. Reynolds declared firmly, arms crossed as she stood in her office doorway. It's against protocol. Lauren had spent the last 20 minutes of her lunch break attempting to convince the house manager to take her on full-time. The temporary cleaning job was ending today, and with it, her access to the Lancaster mansion. Please, Mrs. Reynolds, Lauren pressed. I'm a hard worker, and I learn quickly. I can start immediately, and you have no references for household work, no experience in a private estate, and no permanent address in Connecticut. Mrs. Reynolds shook her head. I'm sorry, but the answer is no. Lauren's shoulders slumped. She'd been counting on this job, not just for investigating her possible connection to the Lancasters, but also because she'd spent nearly all her savings on the hotel room. She needed income. As Lauren gathered her things to leave, Maria appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Lancaster wants to see you in his study. Something about the upcoming dinner party. The house manager sighed. Very well. I'll be there immediately. She turned to Lauren. I'm sorry we couldn't help you. Please make sure you sign out at security. As Mrs. Reynolds hurried away, Maria lingered behind, watching Lauren with those knowing eyes. You're really determined to stay, aren't you? The older woman asked. Lauren nodded. I need the work. Just the work. Maria raised an eyebrow. Not the family photographs you've been studying. Lauren felt her cheeks flush. I've been watching you, child, Maria said, her voice gentle despite her pointed words. The way you look at their pictures, especially at Grace and little Elizabeth. The way you follow Mr. Lancaster with your eyes. You're looking for something. Or someone, Lauren admitted quietly before she could stop herself. Maria's eyes widened slightly. Wait here, she instructed, then disappeared down the hallway. 5 minutes later, she returned with a folded newspaper clipping. Mr. Lancaster wanted someone to oversee the organization of his late wife's personal items. Items currently gathering dust in the East Wing. Lauren looked at the clipping. A job posting for a personal assistant position at the Lancaster estate. This hasn't been published yet, Mrs. Reynolds was going to put it in tomorrow's paper, Maria continued. But perhaps you could apply early today. Why are you helping me? Lauren asked, genuinely puzzled. Maria's weathered face softened. Let's just say I believe some things are meant to be. She squeezed Lauren's hand. If you have questions about this family, there might be a reason for that, but be careful. Not everyone here welcomes questions about the past. To Lauren's astonishment, the impromptu interview with James Lancaster himself went remarkably well. He seemed distracted, asking only perfunctory questions about her experience and qualifications, which she answered with careful half-truths. What captivated his attention was the way she described her organizational methods. You believe objects tell stories. He repeated her words thoughtfully. That personal items hold memories worth preserving. Yes, sir, Lauren nodded. Every possession is a piece of history, a photograph, a letter. Even something as simple as a bookmark can reveal who a person was. James studied her with that same intensity she'd noticed before. My wife felt the same way. She kept everything. Ticket stubs, dried flowers, notes. He trailed off. Lost in memory, when the interview concluded, James offered her the position on the spot, despite Mrs. Reynolds' barely concealed disapproval. But sir, we haven't conducted a proper background check, the house manager protested. Gregory's security team can handle that, James replied dismissively. Miss Wilson can start tomorrow. She'll need accommodations in the staff wing. And just like that, Lauren had not only secured a job at the Lancaster estate, but would be living under the same roof as the man who might be her father. The staff quarters occupied the western portion of the mansion's ground floor. Simple but comfortable rooms with shared bathrooms and a common area. Lauren's room was small but private, with a window overlooking the estate's rose garden. After unpacking her meager belongings, she lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. She was actually here, inside the Lancaster mansion, with access to the very items that might reveal her true identity. The enormity of it all made her dizzy. A knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. Maria stood there with a bundle of linens. Thought you might need extra blankets. Gets chilly at night in these old walls. Lauren invited her in, grateful for a friendly face. Thank you for helping me get this job. I don't know why you did it, but I appreciate it. Maria set the blankets down and sat on the edge of the bed. You look so much like her, she said softly. Like Grace. Same eyes. Same way of tilting your head when you're thinking. Lauren's heart quickened. Did you know her well? I was her lady's maid before becoming head of housekeeping. I was there when she brought little Elizabeth home from the hospital. Maria's eyes grew distant. Such a perfect baby, Mr. Lancaster was so proud. What happened to them? Lauren asked. Though she knew the official story, Maria sighed heavily. The accident happened on a rainy night. They were returning from visiting Grace's sister in Boston. The car went off the road near Stamford. She hesitated. But there were unusual circumstances. What do you mean? Before Maria could answer, another knock sounded. Mrs. Reynolds stood in the doorway, her expression stern. Maria, Mr. Miller is asking for the inventory of silver for next week's dinner. And Miss Wilson, your security paperwork needs completion before tomorrow. Her eyes narrowed as she looked between them. Am I interrupting something? Just bringing extra blankets, Maria replied smoothly, standing up. The nights get cold. After both women left, Lauren found herself even more determined to uncover the truth. Maria clearly suspected something about the accident, something she couldn't freely discuss. The following morning, Lauren began her new job organizing Grace Lancaster's personal belongings. The room she'd been assigned to was a small sitting room adjacent to what had once been Grace's bedroom, now sealed off and untouched since her death. Boxes of personal items filled the sitting room. Clothing, books, jewelry, and countless mementos from Grace's life. Lauren worked methodically, categorizing and documenting each item as instructed, but also searching for anything that might connect to her own past. By mid-morning, James Lancaster appeared in the doorway. He watched silently as Lauren carefully preserved pressed flowers from an old book. You're good at this, he observed finally, respectful of her things. Lauren looked up, startled. Thank you, sir. These items deserve care. He entered the room slowly. picking up a small silver music box. This was her favorite. She'd play it for Elizabeth every night before bed. He opened it, and a gentle lullaby filled the room. Lauren felt an unexpected wave of emotion, as if the melody touched something buried deep within her memory. James noticed her reaction. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she managed. "It's a beautiful song. Brahms' lullaby," he said softly. Elizabeth would fall asleep instantly whenever she heard it. He set the music box down, his fingers lingering on its surface. "Sometimes I think I see her, Grace, in the most unexpected places. A woman in a restaurant with the same laugh, a stranger with her walk." His eyes met Lauren's. "It's strange how the mind plays tricks when you've lost someone." Lauren nodded, unable to find words. Did he sense their connection, even subconsciously before leaving? James paused at the door. "There's a dinner party tomorrow night. Important clients. I'd like you to help Mrs. Reynolds with the preparations." "Of course, sir." After he left, Lauren continued her work with renewed purpose. Somewhere in these boxes lay the key to her past, and possibly her future. What she didn't notice was Gregory Miller watching from the hallway, his expression darkening as he observed the easy rapport between James and the new assistant. "Find anything interesting about our new employee?" he asked the security chief later that afternoon. "Nothing yet, sir. Her background checks out. Waitressing jobs in Chicago, no criminal record, orphaned as a child. Nothing suspicious." Gregory frowned. "Dig deeper. There's something about her I don't trust." He gazed out the window toward the gardens. "James is vulnerable when it comes to memories of Grace. I won't have some opportunistic girl taking advantage of that." "Yes, sir. I'll have a more comprehensive report by tomorrow." Gregory nodded, already formulating his next move. Whoever this Lauren Wilson was, whatever game she was playing, he would make sure she didn't get close enough to James Lancaster to cause any damage. On her third day at the Lancaster mansion, Lauren discovered the diary. She was organizing a box labeled Grace's Books when her fingers brushed against a small leather-bound journal tucked between two hardcover novels. Unlike the other items she'd cataloged so far, this one didn't have a layer of dust. Someone had handled it recently. Lauren glanced toward the door to ensure she was alone before carefully opening the journal. The handwriting inside was elegant and flowing. Grace Lancaster's private thoughts. Lauren hesitated, feeling like an intruder, but her need for answers outweighed her guilt. The earliest entries dated back 25 years, shortly after Grace's marriage to James. Lauren skimmed through the pages, learning about the woman whose daughter she might be. Grace wrote about charity events, her love for James, and her dreams for their future. Her words painted a picture of a warm, compassionate woman who saw beauty in everyday moments. Lauren turned the page and froze. There, in Grace's handwriting, dated just over 22 years ago, Elizabeth smiled for the first time today. A real, intentional smile. Not just gas, as James keeps insisting. She has his eyes when she laughs. Though the shape is more like mine, James took a dozen photos, completely besotted with his little princess. I've never seen him so happy. He says she'll have the world at her feet someday, but all I want is for her to be kind and know she's loved beyond measure. Lauren's hands trembled as she read the passage again. This was her mother writing about her. She felt it with absolute certainty. She quickly flipped forward, searching for entries that might explain what happened after the accident. But the diary ended abruptly a week before the crash. The final entry described preparations for their trip to Boston to visit Grace's sister. "What are you doing?" Lauren jumped, snapping the diary shut. Gregory Miller stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Lauren hadn't heard him approach. "Cataloging Mrs. Lancaster's books," she replied, slipping the diary onto the shelf beside her. Gregory stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving her face. "James mentioned you're doing excellent work. He seems quite impressed with you." "I'm just doing my job, sir." He picked up a framed photo of Grace from the desk. A beautiful woman in riding clothes, laughing at the camera. Grace was extraordinary, irreplaceable. James never recovered from losing her. His eyes flicked to Lauren. "He's vulnerable where she's concerned. I understand, Mr. Miller." "Do you?" He set the photo down carefully. "Because it would be unfortunate if someone were to take advantage of that vulnerability." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Lauren maintained her composure, though her heart pounded against her ribs. I assure you I'm only here to organize Mrs. Lancaster's belongings, as Mr. Lancaster requested. Gregory studied her face for a long moment. Your background check came back clean. Almost too clean. He moved toward the door. Just remember, James Lancaster has people looking out for his best interests. People who've been with him for decades. After he left, Lauren released a shaky breath. She'd made an enemy, though she wasn't sure why Gregory was so suspicious of her. Perhaps he was just being protective of his friend, or perhaps he had secrets of his own he didn't want discovered. He's always been like that, Maria confided later that evening as she and Lauren sat in the staff common room. Mr. Miller keeps a close watch on anyone who gets near Mr. Lancaster, especially women. Why? Lauren asked, sipping her tea. Maria shrugged. Some say he's just protective. Others think he's paranoid. Either way, he's been by Mr. Lancaster's side since before Mrs. Grace died. She lowered her voice. Between us, I never trusted him. The way he looked at Mrs. Grace sometimes. Not right. Looked at her how? Like she was in his way. Maria shook her head. But that's just an old woman's intuition. Probably nothing. Lauren wasn't so sure it was nothing. Maria, earlier you mentioned unusual circumstances about the accident. What did you mean? Maria glanced around the empty room and leaned closer. There were rumors. Nothing concrete. But Mrs. Grace had been nervous those last weeks. Jumpy. She'd get phone calls that would leave her upset. Did she say who they were from? No. But once I overheard her arguing with someone on the phone. She said, I know what you did, and I won't keep quiet anymore. Maria's eyes clouded with old pain. 2 days later, she was dead. Lauren felt a chill run through her. Did you tell anyone? The police asked some questions, but nothing came of it. Mr. Miller handled most of the investigation details for Mr. Lancaster, who was not well after losing them both. A thought occurred to Lauren. Did anyone actually see Elizabeth's body after the accident? Maria's eyes widened slightly. That's the thing. The car caught fire. They identified Mrs. Grace, but the baby... She stopped herself. Listen to me going on with old gossip. It was a terrible tragedy, that's all. But Lauren could see in Maria's eyes that the elderly housekeeper had her own suspicions. Suspicions that aligned with Lauren's growing belief that she hadn't died in that accident after all. The next morning, James Lancaster surprised Lauren by joining her in the sitting room where she was working. I wanted to see how you're progressing, he explained, though his attention seemed more focused on Lauren herself than on the organized items. I've completed the books and personal correspondence, she reported, gesturing to the neatly arranged shelves. I'm starting on photographs today. James nodded, his eyes drawn to a stack of photo albums on the desk. I haven't looked at these in years, he admitted, reaching for the top album. He opened it, and a sad smile touched his lips. Our honeymoon in Tuscany. Grace loved the sunflowers there. Lauren watched as he turned the pages, the pain of his loss still evident after all these years. She seems like she was a wonderful person, she offered gently. The best, he agreed. And Elizabeth was just like her. Even as an infant, you could see Grace's spirit in her. He turned another page, revealing photos of a nursery decorated in soft yellows and greens. We prepared this room for months before she was born. Grace insisted on painting the mural herself. The nursery looked vaguely familiar to Lauren, triggering something deep in her memory, the feeling of lying in a crib, staring up at painted stars on a ceiling. James continued to the next page, which showed a christening ceremony. In the center was a photograph of Grace holding a baby in an elaborate white gown. James standing proudly beside them. She was 6 months old here, James said softly. Elizabeth Grace Lancaster, named after her mother and my grandmother. Lauren studied the baby's face, searching for similarities to her own childhood photos. It was difficult to tell. All babies looked somewhat alike, but the timing matched perfectly with her estimated age when she was left at the orphanage. Mr. Lancaster, she began hesitantly. Did they ever determine exactly what caused the accident? A shadow crossed his face. Wet roads, brake failure. The car went off a bridge. His voice grew tight. Why do you ask? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. It's just so tragic. James closed the album, his expression guarded. It was a long time ago. He stood abruptly. I should let you get back to work. As he moved toward the door, Lauren called after him. "Sir, would it be all right if I organize these photos chronologically? It might help preserve the narrative of your family history." "Yes, that's fine." He paused. "You're doing good work here, Lauren. Grace would have appreciated your attention to detail." After James left, Lauren reopened the photo album, studying each image carefully. There had to be more clues here, something that would definitively connect her to the Lancasters. At lunch, Mrs. Reynolds informed the staff that Mr. Lancaster would be dining with Mr. Miller to discuss business matters. "They're in the main dining room," she instructed. "No one is to disturb them." Lauren nodded obediently, but as she passed the partially open dining room door on her way back to work, she couldn't help overhearing their conversation. "Background checks on all new staff," Gregory was saying. "Especially her." "You're being paranoid, Greg," James replied. "Lauren is doing excellent work with Grace's things. She's respectful, organized, and remarkably interested in the accident that killed your wife and daughter," Gregory countered. Davis mentioned she was asking questions. There was a pause. "What kind of questions?" "About the cause of the crash, about Elizabeth's body." Lauren's heart sank. Davis must be one of the security staff who had overheard her conversation with Maria. "She's naturally curious, that's all," James defended, though his tone held a note of uncertainty. "Or she's another reporter trying to resurrect that old conspiracy theory about the brake lines being tampered with. Remember that expose they tried to run 5 years ago?" Lauren's breath caught. Brake lines tampered with, that wasn't an accident. That was murder. "The police investigated thoroughly," James said firmly. "It was an accident, Greg. A horrible, devastating accident. I'm just looking out for you, old friend. I don't want anyone dredging up painful memories for some tabloid paycheck." Unable to risk being caught eavesdropping, Lauren continued down the hallway, her mind racing. If someone had tampered with the brake lines, that someone had intentionally killed Grace Lancaster, and thought they had killed Elizabeth too. But Elizabeth hadn't died. Somehow, she had survived and ended up at Chicago Children's Home. Lauren was more determined than ever to uncover the full truth, not just about her identity, but about what really happened that rainy night 22 years ago. Lauren woke with a start, heart pounding. Her room was pitch black, except for the digital clock reading 3:17 a.m. Something had jolted her awake, a sound, a presence. But now the room was silent. She reached for the bedside lamp, but her fingers found only empty space. The lamp that had been there when she went to bed was gone. Confused, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and felt cold liquid beneath her bare feet. Water was seeping under her door, already soaking the small rug and creeping toward her bed. Lauren fumbled for her phone, switching on its flashlight. Water was definitely coming in from the hallway, at least an inch deep and rising. She yanked open the door to find the corridor flooded, water gushing from a burst pipe in the ceiling. The staff wing was eerily quiet. Everyone else was either asleep or off duty. Lauren waded through the frigid water toward the maintenance closet where she knew the main water shutoff valve was located. As she reached for the valve, the closet door suddenly slammed shut, nearly crushing her fingers. Lauren jumped back, dropping her phone, which disappeared into the dark water. The narrow hallway was now completely black. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing. "Is someone there?" No answer came, but she could sense she wasn't alone. The hair on the back of her neck stood up as she backed away from the closet. A beam of light suddenly cut through the darkness. "What's going on down here?" It was Frank, the night security guard, holding a powerful flashlight. "Miss Wilson, what happened?" "A pipe burst," Lauren explained, relief washing over her. "I was trying to shut off the water when what?" Lauren hesitated. How could she explain her suspicion that someone had deliberately tried to trap her in the closet? When the door slammed shut, must have been a draft. Frank eyed her skeptically but moved past her to the maintenance closet. He twisted the shutoff valve, and the gushing water gradually slowed to a trickle. "Strange," he muttered, examining the pipe. "These were all checked last month. Shouldn't have burst like this." By morning, the incident had been chalked up to the mansion's aging plumbing system. Mrs. Reynolds relocated Lauren to another room while the water damage was repaired. But Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that the burst pipe wasn't an accident, and that whoever closed that closet door had been watching her since she arrived. "You look tired," Maria observed as Lauren sorted through a box of Grace's personal items later that morning. "Didn't sleep well." Lauren glanced around to ensure they were alone. Maria, has anything strange happened to other staff members here? Accidents, maybe? The older woman's face grew serious. What kind of accidents? Lauren described the flooding and the closet door. It felt deliberate. Maria set down the teacup she was holding. About 15 years ago, there was a young journalist who got hired as a groundskeeper. He was asking questions about the accident, gathering information for a story. She lowered her voice. His first week here, a riding lawnmower malfunctioned. Nearly took his leg off. He left the next day. And 5 years ago, Lauren pressed, remembering Gregory's mention of an exposé. Another reporter, this one posing as a tutor for Mr. Miller's nephew. She was looking into rumors that the brake lines had been tampered with. Maria's eyes clouded. Poor girl fell down the main staircase, broke her arm in 3 places. You don't think these were accidents? This house keeps its secrets well. Child, Maria squeezed Lauren's hand. Be careful where you look. Some doors are better left unopened. Lauren nodded, but inwardly her determination only grew stronger. Someone in this house had gone to great lengths to hide the truth. Not just about the accident, but possibly about her survival and placement in the orphanage. That afternoon, Lauren was organizing files in James Lancaster's study, while he attended meetings in the city. She'd been instructed to sort his personal correspondence, focusing on family matters separate from business. Inside the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk, Lauren discovered a folder labeled simply Memorial. Within it were newspaper clippings about the accident, sympathy cards, and the funeral program for Grace and Elizabeth Lancaster. One item caught her attention, a sealed envelope from Mercy Hospital in Stamford. Lauren carefully opened it to find medical records from the night of the accident. Grace Lancaster had been pronounced dead at the scene, but Elizabeth had been transported to the hospital with severe injuries. Lauren scanned the report, her pulse quickening. According to the document, Elizabeth Lancaster had suffered traumatic injuries but had been stabilized in the emergency room. She was transferred to the pediatric intensive care unit at 11:42 p.m. Yet the death certificate, attached to the back of the report, stated that Elizabeth Lancaster had died of her injuries at 2:17 a.m. Something wasn't right. The detailed medical interventions listed would have been for a living child. If Elizabeth had truly died at the scene, as James believed, there would have been no emergency procedures performed. Lauren carefully photographed the documents with her new phone before returning them exactly as she'd found them. The medical records suggested that she had survived the initial accident. Someone had falsified the death certificate. But who and why? Her thought process was interrupted when the study door opened. James Lancaster entered. His meeting apparently concluded early. "Lauren," he said, surprised. "I didn't expect you to be in here. Mrs. Reynolds asked me to organize your personal correspondence," she explained quickly. "I was just finishing up." James nodded, moving to his desk. His fingers brushed the memorial folder, and pain flashed across his face. "You found this. I'm sorry. I was organizing everything alphabetically. It's all right." He picked up the folder, his knuckles white against the manila paper. "Sometimes I think I should let it all go. Pack away the memories. Move forward. That's what my therapist suggests." He gave a hollow laugh. 22 years and I still can't do it. Lauren's heart ached for him. "It's not wrong to hold on to people you've loved." James studied her face with that same intensity she'd noticed before. "You remind me of her. Not just your appearance, though there is a resemblance. It's your manner. Thoughtful, direct." Lauren swallowed hard. This was her opening. "Mr. Lancaster, may I ask you something?" "Of course. The accident that killed your wife and daughter. I've heard rumors that it might not have been an accident at all." James stiffened. "Where did you hear that?" "Staff talk," Lauren said carefully. "And I noticed the newspaper articles mentioned an investigation." "It was thoroughly investigated," he said firmly. "The police found no evidence of foul play. But you had suspicions." James walked to the window, gazing out at the manicured gardens. Grace had been concerned about something in the weeks before the accident. She wouldn't tell me what exactly, just that she'd discovered something disturbing about someone close to us. "I assumed it was just stress." His voice caught. "I should have pressed harder, made her tell me. Do you think someone wanted to harm her?" "I don't know what to think." James turned back to face her. Why are you so interested in this, Lauren? Lauren hesitated, caught between truth and caution. I lost my parents too, not knowing the full story. It haunts you. Something in her words seemed to reach him. Yes, he said softly. It does. The moment was interrupted by Gregory Miller's voice from the doorway. James, there you are. The Nakamura contracts need your signature. His eyes narrowed when he spotted Lauren. Am I interrupting? Not at all, James replied. Lauren was just organizing some files. Gregory watched as Lauren gathered her things to leave. By the way, he said casually, there was another incident last night. A water pipe burst in the staff wing. Right outside your room, wasn't it, Miss Wilson? Yes, Lauren replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Fortunate that I woke up when I did. Very fortunate, Gregory agreed, his smile not reaching his eyes. Old houses can be so unpredictable. The threat couldn't have been clearer if he'd spoken it aloud. Lauren maintained her composure as she left the study. But inside, a cold fear had taken root. Gregory Miller knew she was digging into the past, and he was warning her to stop. What she couldn't determine was whether he was simply protecting James from painful memories, or if he had a darker reason for wanting the past to stay buried. Either way, Lauren knew she needed to accelerate her investigation. The water pipe was a warning. Next time, she might not be so lucky. Lauren knew she needed to act quickly. Gregory Miller was clearly suspicious of her, and after the pipe incident, she feared what might happen next. She needed solid evidence of her identity, and possibly of Gregory's involvement in the accident, before confronting James with the truth. Her opportunity came 3 days later, when Gregory left for a business trip to Tokyo. With him out of the mansion for at least 48 hours, Lauren could search for the evidence she needed without his watchful eye. Mr. Miller's office is strictly off-limits, Mrs. Reynolds reminded the staff at the morning meeting. His documents are confidential, and the room will remain locked until his return. Lauren nodded along with the others, already formulating a plan. During her weeks at the mansion, she'd noticed the spare keys hanging in Mrs. Reynolds' office. The house manager was meticulous about labeling everything, including the key to Gregory's private study. Getting the key would be difficult, but not impossible. Lauren just needed the right distraction. She found her opportunity that afternoon when the caterers arrived early for an upcoming charity dinner. In the ensuing chaos, Lauren slipped into Mrs. Reynolds' empty office, quickly located the key labeled GM Study, and made a wax impression using materials she'd prepared in advance. She returned the key before anyone noticed it was missing. That night, after the house had gone quiet, Lauren used her homemade key to access Gregory's study. The room was immaculate, almost sterile compared to the warm, lived-in feel of James's office. Everything was perfectly aligned, from the pens on the desk to the books on the shelves. Lauren started with the filing cabinet, carefully searching for anything related to the accident. Finding nothing there, she turned her attention to the desk. The drawers were locked, but her waitressing experience had taught her a few tricks. Using a bobby pin, she managed to unlock the bottom drawer. Inside was a false bottom. Clever, but not clever enough. Lauren pried it open to reveal a hidden compartment containing a USB drive and a thin folder labeled Lancaster Aero 2. Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were documents that made her blood run cold. A receipt for a wire transfer of $50,000 to someone named Margaret Winters, dated 2 days after the accident. A copy of a nursing license belonging to the same Margaret Winters. And most damning of all, a signed statement describing how the package had been delivered as instructed to Chicago. Lauren's heart pounded. Margaret Winters must have been the nurse who took her to the orphanage, the nurse who had falsely declared Elizabeth Lancaster dead. She reached for the USB drive, wondering what secrets it contained. When headlights swept across the window, someone was arriving at the mansion. Lauren quickly returned everything to its place, making sure to leave no trace of her search. She slipped out of the study, locking the door behind her. As she turned to head back to her room, she came face to face with James Lancaster. "Lauren," he asked, surprise evident in his voice, "what are you doing in this wing at this hour?" "I was heading to the library," she improvised. "I couldn't sleep and thought I'd find something to read." James studied her, clearly skeptical. "The library is in the opposite direction." Lauren's mind raced for an explanation. I got turned around. This house is still confusing at night." "It can be," he agreed, though his expression remained doubtful. "Let me walk you back to your room," as they walked in silence. Lauren wrestled with whether to tell him what she'd discovered. The evidence pointed to Gregory's involvement in separating her from her father, but she still didn't understand the motive. Why would Gregory want to make James believe his daughter was dead? "You seem troubled," James observed as they reached her door. Lauren made a decision. "Mr. Lancaster, there's something I need to tell you. Something important. Can it wait until morning? It's been a long day." She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Good night, sir." Lauren barely slept that night, her mind piecing together what she knew. Gregory had arranged for the nurse to falsify Elizabeth's death and transport her to Chicago. But why? What did he gain from James believing his daughter was dead? The next morning, Lauren was summoned to James's study. Her heart raced. Was this about last night? Had he somehow discovered what she'd been doing in Gregory's office? To her surprise, James wasn't alone. A distinguished older gentleman stood beside him, studying a stack of documents. "Lauren, this is Harold Winters, our family attorney," James introduced. "He's helping me update some personal matters while Gregory is in Tokyo." Lauren froze at the surname. Winters, the same as the nurse who had taken her to Chicago? Could they be related? "Pleased to meet you," Harold said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his smile practiced. "James tells me you've been doing excellent work with Grace's belongings." "I've tried my best, sir." Harold's eyes lingered on her face a moment too long before he turned back to James. "The paperwork is all in order. Just need your signature on the last page," as James signed the document. Lauren noticed a photo on Harold's phone as he checked a message. An elderly woman who appeared to be in a nursing home. The name on the visiting pass visible in the photo was clear. Margaret Winters. Lauren's pulse quickened. Harold Winters was connected to the nurse who had taken her to Chicago. This couldn't be coincidence. After Harold left, James explained that he'd been updating his will. Standard procedure he undertook every few years. Lauren nodded politely, her mind elsewhere. She needed to find out more about Harold and Margaret Winters. That afternoon, she searched online for information about the attorney. Harold Winters had indeed been the Lancaster family lawyer for over 30 years. He was also on the board of Lancaster Enterprises alongside Gregory Miller. Most interestingly, Margaret Winters was listed as his sister in a local news article about a charity event. Everything was connected. Harold and Gregory were both close to James professionally and personally. If James had died in that accident, instead of Grace and Elizabeth, they would have controlled Lancaster Enterprises completely. But James had survived, leaving them with only partial influence, unless they could control James through his grief. A man devastated by losing his wife and child would rely heavily on his closest friends and advisors. The realization hit Lauren like a physical blow. Gregory hadn't just wanted Elizabeth declared dead. He might have been responsible for the accident itself. An accident meant to kill all three Lancasters. Not just Grace and Elizabeth, but Lauren needed proof beyond circumstantial connections. She needed to access that USB drive in Gregory's office. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, Mrs. Reynolds informed the staff that James had been called away on urgent business and would return late. "He's meeting with the Tokyo office via video conference from Lancaster Enterprises headquarters downtown," she explained. "He'll be back around midnight." The mansion would be relatively empty. The perfect chance to return to Gregory's office and copy the USB drive's contents. Lauren waited until the night staff was occupied with their duties before slipping back into Gregory's study. She found the USB drive exactly where she'd seen it before, quickly plugged it into her phone using an adapter, and copied its contents. She was replacing the drive when she heard a noise in the hallway. Footsteps approached the door, followed by the sound of a key in the lock. Lauren frantically looked around for a hiding place. The heavy curtains beside the window were her only option. She ducked behind them just as the door opened. Through a tiny gap in the fabric, she saw Gregory Miller enter the room. Gregory, who was supposed to be in Tokyo. He walked directly to the desk and opened the secret compartment, checking its contents. Satisfied, he then made a phone call. "It's me," he said quietly. "I'm back early. Has she been asking more questions?" A pause. "Keep watching her. She's getting too close. If Lancaster starts to suspect anything." Another pause. "No, not in the house. Too risky. We'll handle it the same way we handled the reporters." He ended the call and left the room, locking the door behind him. Lauren remained frozen behind the curtain, her heart thundering in her chest. Gregory knew she was investigating, and he was planning to handle her. She was in danger, and worse, she was trapped in his office. She waited 20 minutes to ensure he was gone before emerging from her hiding place. Using her replica key, she unlocked the door and slipped back into the hallway, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd discovered. Gregory Miller had returned early from Tokyo because he suspected she was getting close to the truth, and now he was planning to silence her. Permanently. Lauren didn't go back to her room that night. Gregory knew she was investigating, and her room would be the first place he'd look. Instead, she made her way to the mansion's vast library and tucked herself into a hidden alcove behind a section of rarely used encyclopedias. With trembling hands, she connected her phone to the library's power outlet and began examining the contents of Gregory's USB drive. Most files were financial records for Lancaster Enterprises. Acquisitions, mergers, stock options, nothing immediately incriminating. Then she found a folder labeled Grace. Inside were surveillance photos of Grace Lancaster taken in the weeks before the accident. Grace had a doctor's appointment. Grace meeting with a man Lauren didn't recognize. Grace looking worried as she made a phone call from a public phone booth. Gregory had been watching James's wife, but why? Another folder contained scanned handwritten notes that appeared to be Grace's diary entries, pages that were missing from the journal Lauren had found earlier. These entries revealed that Grace had discovered financial irregularities in Lancaster Enterprises accounts. Confronted G about the missing funds today. One entry read, "He denied everything, but I saw the guilt in his eyes. $3.2 million doesn't just vanish if he's embezzling from the company." From James, "I have to tell my husband G said I was making dangerous accusations. The way he looked at me. For the first time in all these years, I felt afraid of him." Lauren's breath caught. The next entry was dated just 3 days before the accident. Found proof, offshore accounts in G's name. Transfers dating back 5 years. He's been stealing from the company systematically. J will be devastated. G has been like a brother to him, meeting with Fisher tomorrow to confirm my findings before telling J everything. Sick to my stomach about this. Fisher, that must be the unidentified man in the surveillance photos. Grace had been investigating Gregory's embezzlement and was about to expose him. He'd had a powerful motive to want her silenced. Lauren checked the rest of the USB contents, finding documents and photos about the Chicago children's home where she'd grown up. Gregory had tracked her there, known all along who she was. Dawn was breaking by the time Lauren finished examining the files. She copied everything to her cloud storage account, ensuring the evidence was preserved even if something happened to her phone, or to her. She needed to find James and show him what she'd discovered, but Gregory would be watching. She needed an ally. "Maria, I need your help." Lauren sat in the elderly housekeeper's small private room off the kitchen, having caught her before the morning routine began. "I'm in danger, and I need to speak with Mr. Lancaster privately, away from Mr. Miller." Maria studied Lauren's exhausted face. "You found something, didn't you, about the accident?" "Yes, and about myself." Lauren took a deep breath. "I believe I'm Elizabeth Lancaster. I think I survived the accident, and Gregory arranged to have me declared dead and sent to an orphanage in Chicago." To Lauren's surprise, Maria didn't look shocked. It didn't. "I suspected as much from the moment I saw you," she said quietly. "You have her eyes, Grace's eyes, and the way you tilt your head when you're thinking. Just like her. You knew." "I suspected, but suspecting isn't knowing." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "All these years I've carried the doubt." After the accident, they wouldn't let any of the household staff see Elizabeth's body. "Too badly damaged," they said. "But I was there when you were born. I should have been there to say goodbye." Lauren squeezed the older woman's hand. "I need your help to show Mr. Lancaster what I've found. Gregory is back from Tokyo early, and I think he plans to have me handled, like the reporters who got too close to the truth." Maria's expression hardened. "That man has brought nothing but pain to this family. It's time the truth came out." She thought for a moment. "Mr. Lancaster is in his study this morning. I can create a distraction to keep Gregory occupied while you speak with him." "Thank you," Lauren said, grateful to have an ally in the mansion. "Be careful, child. Gregory is dangerous. More dangerous than you know." When Lauren reached James's study, her nerve almost failed her. How do you tell a man that you're the daughter he's thought dead for 22 years, that his closest friend betrayed him in the worst possible way? She knocked softly. "Come in," James called. He looked up from his desk, surprised to see her. "Lauren, is everything all right? You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't, sir." She closed the door behind her. "There's something important I need to show you." Lauren connected her phone to his computer and began showing him the files from Gregory's USB drive, the surveillance photos of Grace, the diary entries about the embezzlement, the documents tracking Lauren to the Chicago orphanage. James's face grew increasingly pale as he processed what he was seeing. "This can't be right," he whispered. "Greg wouldn't. He couldn't." "There's more," Lauren said gently. "The financial records showing he stole millions from Lancaster Enterprises before the accident. And this," she pulled out her own photo, the one she'd kept all these years. "This is the photograph I had with me at the orphanage. It's identical to the one of Elizabeth in your hallway." James stared at the photo, his hands shaking. "Where did you get this?" "It was with me when I was left at Chicago Children's Home as a toddler." "Mr. Lancaster, I believe I am Elizabeth, your daughter." James looked up at her, his eyes searching her face with new understanding. "All this time," he whispered. "How did I not see it? You have her eyes, Grace's eyes. Gregory arranged for a nurse named Margaret Winters to declare me dead and take me to Chicago. He has a file documenting all of it." James stood abruptly, rage transforming his features. "If what you're saying is true, if Greg was responsible for the accident, for taking my daughter from me, there's something else you need to see," Lauren interrupted, knowing she needed to show him everything before confronting Gregory. "When I was organizing your wife's personal items, I found this hidden in the lining of her jewelry box." She pulled out a yellowed envelope she'd discovered days earlier, but had been afraid to share until she had more evidence. Inside was a letter in Grace's handwriting, dated the day before the accident. "My dearest James, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I pray I'm being paranoid, but I can't ignore the feeling that I'm in danger. Gregory has been embezzling from the company for years, millions of dollars diverted to offshore accounts. I've gathered proof, which I've given to Robert Fisher at the SEC to hold until I can tell you everything. Gregory knows I've discovered his theft. Yesterday, he threatened me, subtly in that way of his, saying that accidents happen to people who don't mind their own business. I'm frightened, James, not for myself, but for you and Elizabeth. He's not the man you think he is. We're leaving for my sister's tomorrow. When we return, we need to go to the authorities together. Until then, please be careful. Don't trust Gregory, no matter what happens. All my love, always. Grace." James read the letter twice, his face ashen. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew he was dangerous, and she tried to warn me." He looked up at Lauren, his eyes filled with pain and dawning recognition. "And you, all these years, my daughter was alive." He reached out tentatively, his hand trembling as it hovered near Lauren's face, as if afraid she might disappear. "Elizabeth." The door burst open before Lauren could respond. Gregory Miller stood in the doorway, his expression cold as he took in the scene before him. "James," he said smoothly, "I see you've been talking with Miss Wilson, or should I say, Elizabeth." His eyes flicked to the computer screen displaying his private files, then to the letter in James's hand. "I had hoped to handle this situation more discreetly. Is it true?" James demanded, his voice raw with emotion. "Did you steal from the company? Did you arrange the accident that killed Grace and separated me from my daughter?" Gregory's face remained impassive. "You're upset, James. You're not thinking clearly. Why don't we discuss this privately? Answer me," James roared, slamming his fist on the desk. A dangerous smile spread across Gregory's face. "Always so emotional, James. That's why I've had to clean up your messes all these years." He glanced at Lauren. "Yes, Grace discovered my financial arrangements. She was going to ruin everything we built. So you killed her," Lauren said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I removed an obstacle," Gregory corrected coldly. "The plan was for all three of you to die in that accident. James surviving was unfortunate, but watching him grieve, depend on me completely while I ran the company. That worked out well enough." "And me?" Lauren asked. "Why separate me from my father? A living heir complicated things. especially one who might eventually remember what happened that night. His hand moved to his jacket pocket. Unfortunately, it seems the past refuses to stay buried. James moved protectively in front of Lauren. You won't hurt her again. Oh, James, Gregory sighed, pulling a small pistol from his pocket. After all these years, you still don't understand. I always get what I want. The tension in James Lancaster's study was suffocating. Gregory stood in the doorway, pistol pointed casually at James and Lauren, as though this were a minor business disagreement rather than a deadly confrontation, decades in the making. Put the gun down, Greg, James said, his voice remarkably steady. We can talk about this. Gregory laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Talk. Now you want to talk? After your daughter has exposed everything? I'm afraid we're well beyond talking, old friend. Lauren's mind raced. The study had only one exit. Currently blocked by an armed man, the windows overlooked a 3-story drop to the stone terrace below. They were trapped. What exactly is your plan here? James asked, subtly positioning himself between Gregory and Lauren. Shoot us both in your own home. That seems sloppy for a man who arranged such an elaborate accident 22 years ago. Gregory tilted his head, acknowledging the point. Times change. I've learned that sometimes directness is more efficient than elegance. A knock at the door interrupted the standoff. Mr. Lancaster, Mrs. Reynolds called from the hallway. You have an urgent call from Singapore. Gregory motioned with the gun for them to remain silent. Tell them I'll call back, James shouted, his eyes never leaving Gregory's face. It's the Nakamura merger, sir. They say it can't wait. Gregory considered for a moment. Tell them he'll be right there. He called in a perfect imitation of James's tone. He's just finishing something important. Very good. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Reynolds replied, and they heard her footsteps retreating down the hall. She knows you're in here, James observed. A minor complication. Gregory shrugged. Now, both of you are going to walk very calmly to the garage. We're taking a drive. Lauren knew what that meant. If they left the mansion with Gregory, they wouldn't be coming back. I sent copies of everything to the police, she bluffed, hoping to buy time. All the evidence, Grace's letter, everything. If anything happens to us, they'll know it was you. Gregory's expression flickered with uncertainty, before settling back into smug confidence. Nice try, Elizabeth, but you've been very careful to keep your investigation secret, haven't you? Afraid I might handle you like those nosy reporters. He gestured with the gun. Move now. As they stepped into the hallway, Lauren caught sight of Maria watching from around a corner, horror evident on her face. Lauren gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, warning the older woman to stay hidden. Gregory directed them through the mansion's less used corridors, avoiding areas where staff might be working. As they passed the grand staircase, James suddenly stumbled, falling heavily against Gregory. Sorry, he muttered, regaining his footing. Bad knee. Gregory shoved him forward irritably. Keep moving. Lauren noticed James had palmed something during the collision, a small object now concealed in his hand. The slight hope of escape flickered to life. They reached the garage where a black SUV with tinted windows waited. Get in the back, Gregory instructed. Both of you. As Lauren moved toward the vehicle, the unmistakable sound of police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Gregory's head whipped toward the sound. What did you do? He snarled at Lauren. Nothing, she replied honestly, equally confused by the approaching sirens. It was me, a new voice announced. Frank, the night security guard, stepped into the garage, a shotgun trained on Gregory. Mrs. Reynolds thought it was strange that Mr. Lancaster would let Mr. Miller answer for him. She called me and I called the police. Gregory's face contorted with rage. He swung his pistol toward Frank, but before he could fire, James launched himself at his former friend. The two men crashed to the concrete floor, struggling for control of the weapon. Run, James shouted to Lauren, but she couldn't leave her father, not when she'd only just found him. Instead, she grabbed a wrench from a nearby workbench and brought it down hard on Gregory's wrist. The pistol clattered across the floor. Gregory howled in pain and fury with surprising strength for a man his age. He threw James off and scrambled toward the fallen gun. Frank fired a warning shot that echoed deafeningly in the enclosed space. But Gregory was beyond reason now. James tackled him again just as his fingers brushed the pistol. The two men rolled across the floor. Decades of friendship dissolved into bitter combat. "Dad!" Lauren cried out, the word escaping her lips for the first time. The momentary distraction was all Gregory needed. He delivered a vicious blow to James's face and lunged again for the gun. This time, his hand closed around it. Frank fired again, the blast striking a nearby car. Gregory returned fire, forcing the security guard to take cover behind a pillar. "End of the line," Gregory panted, blood streaming from a cut above his eye as he aimed the pistol at James. "Should have let me handle the company my way all those years ago." A screech of tires outside announced the arrival of the police. Gregory glanced toward the sound, momentarily distracted. It was all the opening Lauren needed. She swung the wrench with all her strength, connecting with Gregory's shoulder. He staggered, off balance, as James surged forward and wrestled him to the ground. Police officers poured into the garage. Weapons drawn. Police. Freeze. Gregory was subdued and handcuffed, still spitting threats and accusations as they led him away. An officer approached Lauren and James, who sat exhausted on the garage floor. "Are you both all right?" the officer asked. James looked at Lauren, his eyes filled with wonder despite his battered face. "Yes," he said softly. "For the first time in 22 years, I think we are." The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements, medical examinations, and urgent phone calls. Gregory was taken into custody, charged with attempted murder, with more charges pending as the investigation into Grace's death and the embezzlement reopened. James refused to leave Lauren's side throughout the ordeal, as if afraid she might disappear again. By evening, they found themselves alone in his study, the same room where everything had exploded just hours earlier. "I still can't believe it," James said, staring at the family photograph on his desk. Grace holding baby Elizabeth. "All these years, you were alive, growing up without me, without knowing who you were. I always wondered about my parents," Lauren replied. "Why they gave me up, if they ever thought about me." James reached across the desk to take her hand. "If I had known you were alive, nothing would have kept me from finding you. Nothing. I know that now." Her eyes filled with tears. "When I found that photograph here, it was like something clicked into place. Deep down, I think I always felt the connection to this house. To you." The study door opened and Maria entered carrying a tray with tea and sandwiches. "You both need to eat something," she insisted, her own eyes red from crying. "Such a day we've had." "Maria," James said warmly, "you should join us, if not for you and Mrs. Reynolds noticing something was wrong." The older woman smiled tearfully. "I always had my suspicions about that accident. The way Mr. Miller took control afterward, the way he kept people from asking questions." She looked at Lauren. "But when you arrived, looking so much like your mother, I knew the truth would come out somehow. There's still so much I don't understand," Lauren admitted. "How did I survive the crash? Who took me to Chicago?" James sighed heavily. "The police found Margaret Winters at a nursing home in Vermont. She's agreed to tell everything she knows in exchange for immunity." He shook his head in disbelief. Gregory had been planning this for months, the exact route Grace would take, the tampered brake lines, a nurse on his payroll waiting at the hospital. But why didn't he just... Lauren couldn't finish the thought. "Kill you at the hospital." James's face darkened. According to Detective Ramirez, Gregory wanted to avoid suspicion. A miraculous survivor who later died of complications raised fewer questions than a murder victim. But then he changed his mind and had me taken to Chicago instead. James nodded. "It seems Harold Winters convinced him that was safer. No body that might later be exhumed. No autopsy records that might contradict the official story. Just a child disappearing into the foster system halfway across the country. The weight of how meticulously their lives had been manipulated settled over them. Gregory and Harold had orchestrated not just a murder, but the complete dismantling of a family, all for money and power. Tomorrow will be difficult, James warned. The press will get hold of this story, and they'll want interviews, photographs. Your life is about to change dramatically." Lauren hadn't considered the media attention their story would generate. "I don't care about any of that," she said firmly. "All that matters is that we found each other. We can face whatever comes next together." James's eyes shone with tears and determination. "Together," he agreed. "No one will ever separate us again." Outside the study window, Thunder rumbled as storm clouds gathered over Greenwich. A fitting end to a day that had seen decades of carefully constructed lies finally wash away, revealing the truth that had been buried beneath them all along. Lauren stood by the window of what had once been Grace Lancaster's dressing room, now hastily converted into her temporary bedroom. The media frenzy outside the estate's gates had grown exponentially over the past 24 hours. News vans lined the street, reporters desperate for a glimpse of the heiress returned from the dead. As the New York Post had dramatically dubbed her, DNA results had confirmed what they already knew. Lauren Wilson was indeed Elizabeth Lancaster. The scientific validation had triggered a tsunami of press coverage, with outlets from around the world clamoring for exclusive interviews. "You shouldn't stand so close to the window," James advised, entering the room with a stack of newspapers. "They have telephoto lenses." Lauren stepped back, drawing the curtains. "Sorry, still adjusting to the idea that people care where I stand." James placed the newspapers on a side table, his expression grim. "The media is having a field day. Gregory's arrest, your miraculous return, the corporate embezzlement scandal. It's a perfect storm of sensationalism. Have you read them? Only the headlines. That's more than enough." He gestured to the top newspaper, which blared, "Lancaster heir found. Decades-long deception exposed." Lauren sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. "I never imagined it would be like this. I just wanted to know where I came from." James sat beside her, his movements still hesitant, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "We could leave. Go to the house in Montana until this dies down. We can't run away," Lauren replied firmly. "Gregory's preliminary hearing is tomorrow. We need to be there." James nodded, though worry lined his face. "The security team will create a plan to get us in and out with minimal exposure to the press. Harold's arraignment is scheduled for next week. The prosecutor thinks both will face multiple charges. Conspiracy. Murder, kidnapping, embezzlement." He shook his head in disbelief. "My closest friend and my family's attorney? I trusted them completely." The pain in his voice was palpable. Gregory's betrayal had shaken James to his core, making him question every relationship in his life. "Not everyone betrayed you," Lauren reminded him gently. "Maria suspected something was wrong all these years. Mrs. Reynolds and Frank acted immediately when they sensed danger." "You're right," James acknowledged. "I've been so focused on the betrayal that I overlooked the loyalty." He paused, studying her face. "You have her wisdom, you know. Grace always saw the good in situations, even dark ones." A knock at the door interrupted them. Maria entered, carrying a small wooden box. "I found this in the attic storage," she explained, setting it on the bed. "I thought you might want to see it before tomorrow's hearing." James opened the box to reveal dozens of photographs. Elizabeth as a newborn, as a smiling infant, crawling, taking her first steps. "I kept copies of all the family photos," Maria explained. "After the accident, Mr. Miller ordered all pictures of Elizabeth removed from the house. Said it was too painful for you, Mr. Lancaster, but I couldn't bear to throw them away." Lauren picked up a photo of herself at about 18 months, close to the age she'd been when taken to the orphanage. She was sitting on Grace's lap, both of them laughing at the camera. "I have no memory of her," Lauren said softly. "Of either of you. My earliest memories are from the children's home. Margaret Winters gave a full statement to the police this morning," James said. "She confessed to falsifying your death certificate and transporting you to Chicago. She claims she didn't know Gregory had orchestrated the accident. She thought she was just helping cover up the embezzlement by removing an heir who might inherit control of the company someday." "Do you believe her?" Lauren asked. James sighed heavily. "I don't know what to believe anymore. The woman helped steal my child. Whether she knew about the murder plot or not seems almost irrelevant." Maria squeezed Lauren's shoulder. "The detectives also found something interesting in Harold's lake house. Documentation of payments to the director of the Chicago Children's Home back then. It seems he was paid to ensure you were never adopted. To keep you in the system." Lauren felt her chest tighten. All those years wishing for a family, watching other children leave with their new parents, never understanding why no one wanted her. It had all been by design. "Gregory was thorough," James said bitterly. "He thought of everything." "Not everything," Lauren countered. "He didn't count on me finding my way back here." The following morning dawned gray and rainy, Fitting weather for Gregory Miller's preliminary hearing. James had arranged for a private security team to escort them to the courthouse, bypassing the media encampment at the main gates by using a rarely used service entrance. Lauren stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a conservative navy suit that Mrs. Reynolds had helped her select. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, not just by the expensive clothes or the professionally styled hair, but by the knowledge of who she truly was. No longer Lauren Wilson, orphaned waitress, Elizabeth Grace Lancaster, daughter of James and Grace, rightful heir to the Lancaster fortune and legacy. The name still felt foreign on her tongue. She'd been Lauren for as long as she could remember. Would she ever feel like Elizabeth? "Ready?" James asked from the doorway, looking distinguished despite the strain of recent days. "As ready as I'll ever be." They traveled in a bulletproof SUV with tinted windows, part of a 3-vehicle convoy designed to confuse the press. Detective Ramirez, who had been assigned to lead the investigation, rode with them. Gregory's attorneys pushed hard for bail, Ramirez informed them, but the judge denied it, given the severity of the charges and his resources to flee. "What about Harold?" Lauren asked. "Singing like a canary, he's offering testimony against Gregory in exchange for leniency." Ramirez shook his head. "Turns out your father's attorney has kept meticulous records of everything for over 2 decades. Insurance. He called it honor among thieves," James commented dryly as they approached the courthouse. Lauren's anxiety mounted. This would be her first public appearance as Elizabeth Lancaster. More importantly, it would be the first time she'd face Gregory since he'd held them at gunpoint. The convoy pulled into the courthouse's secure underground garage, where more officers waited to escort them inside. The building had been cleared of press, but Lauren could hear the clamor of reporters and camera crews gathered at the entrance above. Inside the courtroom, they were directed to seats behind the prosecutor's table. The room was eerily quiet, with only essential personnel present, a stark contrast to the circus outside. "He'll be brought in through that door," Ramirez explained, pointing to a side entrance. "Try not to react, no matter what he says or does." Lauren nodded, her throat dry. James reached over and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Carlisle," the bailiff announced. Everyone stood as the judge entered and took her seat. Moments later, the side door opened, and Gregory Miller was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. Despite his circumstances, he carried himself with the same arrogant confidence Lauren had observed at the mansion. His eyes swept the courtroom, landing on James and Lauren with unsettling intensity. A small, knowing smile played at his lips, as if he still held secrets they hadn't discovered. The charges were read: first-degree murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, criminal conspiracy, grand theft, securities fraud. Gregory pleaded not guilty to all counts, his voice clear and unwavering. Throughout the proceedings, Lauren felt his gaze returning to her repeatedly, calculating and cold, even in custody. Gregory Miller exuded menace. She couldn't shake the feeling that, somehow, he still had moves to make in this deadly game. As the hearing concluded, the judge set a trial date 6 months out. Gregory was being led away when he suddenly turned toward James and Lauren. "This isn't over, James," he called, his voice carrying across the courtroom. "You think you know everything, but you have no idea what's really been happening right under your nose. Ask your precious daughter about Chicago, about the people she met there." The guards pulled him through the door before he could say more, leaving a confused silence in his wake. "What was that about?" James asked Lauren. "What did he mean about Chicago?" Lauren shook her head, genuinely puzzled. "I don't know. I waited tables, lived in a small apartment with a roommate. There's nothing mysterious about my time there." Detective Ramirez frowned. "Classic manipulation. He's trying to create doubt, drive a wedge between you two." "He's desperate," the prosecutor agreed, joining their conversation. "The evidence against him is overwhelming." But as they left the courthouse through the secure exit, Lauren couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Gregory's parting words seemed too specific to be a random attempt at distraction. Was there something about her life in Chicago that connected to this tangled web of deceit? Something she hadn't discovered yet. The rain had intensified, drumming on the roof of the SUV as they pulled away from the courthouse. Lauren stared out at the gray landscape, unable to escape the feeling that despite all they had uncovered, they were still missing something crucial. Whatever it was, She knew with absolute certainty that tomorrow night's charity gala at the Lancaster Mansion, her official introduction to society as Elizabeth Lancaster, would be far more than a simple coming-out party. It would be a reckoning. The Lancaster Mansion glowed like a beacon against the night sky. Hundreds of tiny lights illuminated the gardens, creating a magical atmosphere for the annual charity gala, an event that had taken on extraordinary significance this year. Tonight wasn't just a fundraiser. It was Elizabeth Lancaster's official introduction to society. Lauren, now publicly acknowledged as Elizabeth, stood in her mother's former dressing room, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. The elegant emerald gown complemented her eyes, which everyone now remarked were exactly like Grace's. Her dark hair had been styled in loose waves, falling softly around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," James said from the doorway. "Exactly like her." Elizabeth turned, still adjusting to her new identity. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "All those people down there, expecting. I don't know what they're expecting." "They're expecting Grace Lancaster's daughter," James replied simply. "And that's exactly who you are," he approached, holding a velvet jewelry box. "I wanted you to have this tonight." Inside lay a stunning diamond and emerald necklace. "It was your mother's," James explained. "She wore it to our first charity gala after we were married," as he fastened it around her neck. Elizabeth felt the weight of legacy settling upon her shoulders. In a matter of weeks, she had gone from anonymous waitress to heiress of one of America's most prominent fortunes. The transformation was dizzying. "What if I disappoint them?" she whispered. "What if I disappoint you?" James turned her gently to face him. "You could never disappoint me. You're my miracle, Elizabeth. The daughter I thought I'd lost forever." His eyes grew serious. "If this is too much, too soon, we can cancel. The world can wait." She shook her head. "No, we need to do this. I'm ready." But even as she spoke the words, Gregory Miller's cryptic comment at the courthouse lingered in her mind. "Ask your precious daughter about Chicago, about the people she met there." What had he meant? The grand ballroom was filled to capacity with New York's elite. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, all eager to witness the Lancaster reunion firsthand. Conversations hushed as James and Elizabeth appeared at the top of the marble staircase. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice rang out, "Mr. James Lancaster and his daughter, Miss Elizabeth Lancaster." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by thunderous applause as they descended the staircase. Elizabeth felt hundreds of eyes examining her, looking for traces of grace in her features. Assessing whether she was worthy of the Lancaster name, James squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Just breathe," he whispered. "You're doing wonderfully." For the next hour, they moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations and fielding polite questions. Elizabeth was grateful for Maria's crash course in remembering names and affiliations of key Lancaster associates. The elderly housekeeper had positioned herself discreetly near the refreshment table, occasionally catching Elizabeth's eye with an encouraging nod. "Miss Lancaster, what an extraordinary story," gushed a silver-haired woman in designer couture. "To think you were working as a waitress all these years. How dreadfully common." Elizabeth smiled politely. "It taught me the value of hard work and self-reliance, Mrs. Winthrop. Values I believe the Lancaster family has always prioritized." James beamed with pride at her diplomatic response. She was a natural, poised, gracious, and subtly commanding respect without arrogance. As the evening progressed, Elizabeth excused herself for a moment of solitude in the library. The constant scrutiny was exhausting, and she needed a brief respite. She was examining the family photos now prominently displayed on the mantel when she heard the door open behind her. Quite the spectacle. "Isn't it?" The voice was unfamiliar, with a slight Midwestern accent. Elizabeth turned to find a distinguished man in his 60s, observing her with keen interest. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said carefully. "Robert Fisher, Securities and Exchange Commission." He extended his hand. "Your mother reached out to me just before her death. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you, Miss Lancaster." Elizabeth's pulse quickened. Fisher, the man mentioned in Grace's letter, the one she'd given evidence of Gregory's embezzlement to before the accident. "Mr. Fisher, we should speak privately," he interrupted, glancing toward the door. Is there somewhere more secure? Elizabeth led him to James's study, sending a text to her father to join them immediately. As they entered the wood-paneled room, Fisher's demeanor became more serious. "I was devastated when I heard about the accident," he explained. "Your mother had contacted me with concerns about financial irregularities at Lancaster Enterprises. We were scheduled to meet the day after she died." He removed a flash drive from his pocket. "She sent me these files the night before the accident. I've kept them all these years, waiting for the right moment." "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Elizabeth asked. "I tried. I contacted your father repeatedly in the weeks after the funeral, but his associate, Gregory Miller," Elizabeth supplied. "Yes, Miller said your father was too distraught to discuss business matters and would handle all communications. When I persisted, I found myself under investigation for unrelated matters. A clear warning to back off. The study door opened, and James entered, his expression questioning. "Dad, this is Robert Fisher from the SEC. He knew Mom." Fisher quickly explained the situation, showing them the flash drive. "This contains evidence not just of Gregory's embezzlement, but of something much bigger. Your mother had discovered that Miller was using Lancaster Enterprises as a front for money laundering, cleaning cash for some very dangerous people in Chicago. Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine, Gregory's courtroom taunt suddenly making sense. "The Chicago connection," she whispered. Fisher nodded. "Miller's associates there would have been monitoring you all these years, making sure you never discovered your true identity or made your way back to your father." James's face darkened with fury. "Are you saying organized crime was involved in my wife's death, in the kidnapping of my daughter? I'm saying Gregory Miller had powerful partners who would have gone to any length to protect their operation. The Chicago Children's Home where Elizabeth was placed wasn't chosen randomly. It was controlled by these same individuals." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The orphanage director who had been paid to keep Lauren from being adopted. The strange accidents that had plagued her life whenever she'd tried to research her origins. Even her roommate in Chicago, who had mysteriously disappeared after Lauren mentioned finding a job at the Lancaster estate. Gregory wasn't working alone, Elizabeth realized. He had help. Powerful help. "And they're still out there," Fisher confirmed grimly. "Miller's arrest doesn't end this. His partners will be scrambling to cover their tracks, eliminate loose ends. Like us," James said flatly. A knock at the study door interrupted them. Frank, the security guard, entered with an urgent expression. "Sir, there's a situation. We've detected unauthorized activity on the property's west perimeter." James immediately went into action. "Lock down the mansion, get all guests to the main ballroom, away from windows. Call Detective Ramirez." As Frank hurried away, James turned to Elizabeth. "We need to get you somewhere safe." "No," she said firmly. "I'm done running, done hiding. These people stole my life once. I won't let them do it again." James looked at his daughter with a mixture of fear and pride. "What do you suggest?" "We use what we have," she replied. Picking up Fisher's flash drive. "We expose everything, not just Gregory's crimes, but the entire operation right now, with all these influential people gathered here. It's risky," Fisher warned. "These are dangerous people. More dangerous than living a lie," Elizabeth countered. "More dangerous than letting them continue to destroy lives." Her father studied her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Maria," he called, knowing the loyal housekeeper would be nearby. "Gather all security personnel and seal all entrances except the main doors. Then inform our guests that there will be a special announcement in 10 minutes. In the grand ballroom, murmurs of confusion spread as the mansion went into lockdown mode. Security personnel positioned themselves at all exits, while Detective Ramirez, who had arrived with remarkable speed, coordinated with his officers. James and Elizabeth took to the stage where the orchestra had been playing moments earlier. The crowd hushed as James stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. We have a situation that requires your attention and cooperation." He gestured to the screens usually used for the charity auction, now displaying documents from Fisher's flash drive. 22 years ago, my wife Grace discovered evidence of criminal activity within Lancaster Enterprises, activity orchestrated by my then-partner, Gregory Miller. Gasps rippled through the audience as James outlined the money laundering operation. the embezzlement, and the murder plot that had claimed Grace's life and separated him from his daughter for over 2 decades. As he spoke, Elizabeth scanned the crowd, noticing several men speaking urgently into cell phones, others moving surreptitiously toward the exits where they were intercepted by security. "Tonight," James concluded, "we're not just celebrating my daughter's return. We're reclaiming the Lancaster legacy from those who corrupted it. With the evidence we now possess, and with the witnesses in this room, we will ensure that all responsible parties are brought to justice." Elizabeth stepped forward. "For 22 years, I lived as Lauren Wilson, never knowing my true identity or family. I stand before you now as Elizabeth Lancaster, asking for your help in ensuring that such a crime can never happen again." The ballroom erupted in applause as Detective Ramirez took the stage, announcing that arrests were already underway based on the evidence presented. Among those being quietly detained were 2 board members of Lancaster Enterprises, a prominent Chicago businessman, and Harold Winters' son, who had been working as part of the security team as the evening drew to a close. With police taking statements and guests departing with unprecedented gossip for their social circles, Elizabeth found herself back in the library, gazing at the portrait of her mother. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. "We exposed them all." James joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Grace would be so proud of you," he said softly. "As am I." Elizabeth leaned into her father's embrace, feeling truly at home for the first time in her life. The journey had been long and dangerous, but the truth had finally triumphed. Outside, dawn was breaking over Greenwich. A new day, a new beginning for the Lancaster family, reunited at last.